Right, good afternoon to everyone and welcome to the next SAGTA webinar. This is definitely one that has grabbed everyone's attention and the response has been great. Unfortunately, it would appear load shedding has kind of got us on our knees here. So we are recording and hopefully for the people who are not able to join us, unfortunately for this one, they will be able to join us for the recording. Okay, right, let's go. We want to just quickly remind everyone, please, that we prefer it if you could keep your video off and your sound muted, please. It's just going to be easier for screening. We are recording and we're happy if you are able to join us. And we'd like to ask you to please ask your questions in the chat. There will also be time at the end if you have any questions for Eileen. I'm sure she'll be happy to answer them. We hope you enjoy it. And if you're not a SAGTA member, please go and join on our website. It will tell you all the information that you need there. So, Jackie, could you welcome Eileen for us, please? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful. Eileen, I've been waiting for this countdown on my board for 10 days. I'm extremely excited, and I'm sure there's many of us that are so much looking forward to learning from you. Ladies and gents, if you don't know Eileen, she's one of our senior markers, has been doing essays for a number of years. And during this time, she has led a team of amazing people. Not only has she mentored new teachers in the way of writing and marking essays, but also mentored oldies like me who finds essays terrifying. So it gives me great pleasure. And Eileen, from all of us, we just want to say thank you so much. And we are just grateful for anything you can teach us today to help us ourselves as personal growth and within the classroom. So thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jackie and everybody. Enika, I'm feeling like such a fraud being here because I really don't know anything more about essays than the rest of you do. I think my only claim to fame is that I'm so old that I've been doing this longer than many of you have been alive. So I suppose you pick up something on the way, but thank you very much for inviting me to be here. And Jackie, thank you for your very kind words. And I must tell you that I have to give all credit to Steph Bauer because I've always loved doing the essays, but I think until Steph put a really structured program in place, it was really hard for us to standardize and to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And Steph has been amazing in putting together such a detailed rubric for us. And I just think everybody should have to mark essays, because once you mark essays, you will never want to not mark essays. They are the most amazing. I just love them. And I don't understand why people are nervous about marking essays. And then my darling friend Bronwyn said to me, it's probably they feel about essays the way I feel about GIS, that I go into palpitations and think, oh God, I can't do this. So if that is how you feel, then hopefully you'll realize essays are actually such fun. So let's see if this will share for me. Give me half a second, and I'm hoping it will share.
Awesome. Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just trying to go and say show from the beginning. All right, can you see? What can you see, guys? I sound like with my classes. What can you see?
Just waiting for the slideshow to start. It hasn't come through yet.
Okay.
Geography E says 101.
Yes, that's it. Okay, and can you see the full screen, or is it just giving you my little thing and stuff down the side?
Just your little thing and the stuff down the side.
No, because I'm trying to go, hang on, there we go. Let's see if it'll give me, it's not giving me, there we go. Now it's listening to me. There we go. It's just a bit slow, like me in my old age. All right, so hopefully it will work. If it stops working, please just shout, because I know I've blather on far too long. But I do want to welcome everybody and say that marking geography essays is the best thing in the world, because you never get bored. You learn so much. I know that every time we do marking, you all know this, when you mark, you learn so much from the students' papers that you're marking and from your colleagues. But I learn so much about how the students are thinking. So I just want to say I'm going to be sharing some resources today that I'm taking from the IEB papers, obviously not the actual students, but from the question papers, So I do want to just acknowledge and say thank you to the IAB for the papers, and particularly, as I said, Steph, who is just, I think Steph is just amazing. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is that when, you know, with the geography essays, I think that they're very different to essays in other subjects, because in the other subjects, the girls say things like, oh, but in history or English, we write 3 essays in 3 hours. Why do we have to throw together an essay in 20 to 25 minutes in geography? And I have to say to them, you know, it's different subjects, different rules. You just got to get used to maximizing your time, using your time productively. So what I say to them, and I know people like Greg Bauer have always said this to the students as well, don't waste your reading time reading the questions. Use that reading time to look at the sources for all the different questions, but particularly for the essays, because what's always very sad for me is that so many of the students don't use the sources that are provided for them. And the sources are given to them so that even those who possibly have not had access to good textbooks, or who possibly have not had teachers available all year, there is something that they can use to make a meaty, substantial essay. So this particular source is from the supplementary paper that was written last month. And this is actually the essay question that we marked on Saturday at the supplementary paper marking. And, you know, I would just say to the students, don't even look at what the essay wants you to do. Spend some time, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, just looking at the sources given to you. So for instance, if you have a look at this, the essay was on the eThekwini region municipality. So what traditionally would have been taught in the past as the Durban Pinetown region. And the heading even says that it's on secondary and tertiary activities. So that should give them a clue already. Then if you look at this beautiful infographic that was put together, you can see it shows them, first of all the major industries of that area. Then it shows also things such as the contribution to the GDP or from that area of the different activities. So from mining, which is only 1%, to such things as finance and transport, which make up 15, 12, government 15%. So the the students should start getting an idea of what the important things are in this particular region. Then it also gives them some stats that they can throw in. So for instance, if we look here, this area houses 19% of South Africa's population, and there's the actual figure, 11.1 million. It grows annually by 1.8%. And as a region, it contributes currently 16% to the SA GDP. Now, any high thinking or high top student will already think, hang on, 19% of the population live here, and it contributes 16% to the GDP. So it's clearly not the most important region, but it's contributing quite a lot. And this is where if I say if the students start looking at the sources, they start thinking, what do these figures and words tell me? It's not just about regurgitating them. It's saying, well, what are the biggest ones? How do they factor in? What does that mean for the country? And the astute students even pick up, here's a little location map for them. There is where KwaZulu-Natal area is. They can see, and we noticed on Saturday that some of the top students immediately pointed out, this area is part of the KwaZulu-Natal province. It's situated on the southeastern coastline, which gives them some insight into the climate. It gives them insight into the fact that it's beautifully situated for exports to the Far East and to Australia, and imports as well. So even if they don't know the area, they can make inferences from the information they're given. Also mentioned are the very important transport hubs. So there's the Durban Harbour, there's the King Shaka Airport, there's the Richards Bay Harbour, and of course for many of the students, they will have supplemented information with new things such as the Dubai Trade Port, the fact that the Durban Harbour is already at maximum capacity, and there are plans which have been afoot, if I can say that, plans in the pipeline for at least 15 years of redeveloping the old Durban airport and redeveloping that into an overflow kind of harbour. So this is where they can start throwing in extra information. So before they've even looked at the question, they need to say, there's an awful lot, there's a lot of stuff on this given information that I can use to develop and explain my ideas. And one of the things also that I keep saying to the students is the essay is a wonderful place for throwing in your evidence of stuff that you've learned that you haven't yet had the opportunity to be asked on. So try and show off. I always say to them, show off your knowledge. So this was the actual question, and please excuse me scribbling on it. When we were going over what we were looking for, I do this as a matter of course for myself. I try and highlight what is important, and I'm sure you all do this as well. Encourage your students to bring in a highlighter or to underline the important things. So what are they being asked to do, and what does each part of the question focus on? So first of all, they had to write a report. So yes, it is an essay, but they need to remember that they are writing in a formal style, as always for geography essays. So it was broken up into 4 parts. They had to assess, so that's more than just list. That means they have to make some kind of evaluation or some judgment call on the main factors influencing the location of the eThekwini industrial region. So what are the things that are good and that are bad that led to that location either growing or being stunted? So it's really judging the factors that are important. So here they need to bring in all the factors that influence the location of any kind of industrial region. So the smart students are already thinking, okay, what are the factors that influence the location of any industrial region? And how can they then apply that for eThekwini? Then they had to describe the main industrial activities. So that's more of a low order type thing where they literally can go to the source material or their own knowledge, and they're going to tell you the main activities that happen there. So if they went back to their previous source, it gives them, they just have to list, and even the poor students, the weak students can list the things that are there. The top students will start unpacking that a little bit more, and they will start saying why sugar is such an important one and why the whole sugar processing industry is so important, because they can link it to the climate. And then why such things as mining. If you look here, a lot of them, not a lot of them, a couple of the students said when we marked on Saturday, mining is only 1%. So the government needs to make this bigger. They need to invest more money in mining. And you think, well, that's when a good geographer will start picking up things and saying, what is it that is mined in that area? What have I learned about? Is there anything of any significance that is mined apart from maybe coal, or they might talk about ilmenite or lithium or whatever they might have learned about? This is where they can start saying why something is a major contributor or maybe it's a minor contributor. Then the third thing is to outline. So that's a little bit more than list. It means unpack it a little bit. The factors that promote industrial development in this area and those that hinder the industrial development. So they've got 4 very clear sets of things to focus on. Okay, I don't know if anybody wants to jump in or if I should just continue and save questions till the end. Shall I just carry on?
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, all right. So what we have found, and this is just from years and years of marking, we have found that candidates who do some kind of planning, a simple little mind map or a list of keywords, typically score better marks. And the girls always say, but we don't have time to plan. I promise you, we've brainstormed it in the classroom. They can plan an essay in 15 seconds, 20 seconds, less than a minute, by simply going through each of those 4 points and saying, what keywords am I going to note down for each of these 4 points? So literally brainstorming in their minds all the things that come to mind when they think about factors influencing the location, and then specific to eThekwini. What are the main industrial activities? Go to the sources, add in anything that you've learned that's not in these given sources. So literally just a mind map that would have even the 4 sections. And then I always say to the girls, although they don't listen, but I say, write down the keywords, the key geography words, because this is the meat. This is the meat, the skeleton, I'm making mixed metaphors here, that you are going to build your discussion around. And the whole point of planning is so that you don't waste time when you're putting in lots and lots of repetition. So we found that some candidates will say the same thing over and over and over and over. They only get credit for it once. So if they've planned it to come under a specific paragraph, like, okay, this is a factor that hinders it, put it under that little heading. And then to build up a set of keywords, and I always say to them, create a sentence around each keyword. One thing to explain what that keyword means, and then another extension of that, extrapolate that point a little bit to explain why or how it's relevant to this particular essay, to this particular case study. So the keyword alone doesn't mean anything unless they develop that for the particular case study. The more keywords they have, the more meaty their essays will be and the less waffle that you will find. Some of the girls can write me 3 pages and I say to them, you find me a single geography fact in this. It's like giving me a pot of hot water. There's just water. I don't want water. I want nice thick vegetable soup and lots of noodles and lots of meat and lots of carrots. Make it full of information, full of nutrients, because that's what we're looking for. The planning also makes them make sure that they've got something under each of the 4 sections, because when we mark, a candidate who has not covered all 4 sections cannot score full marks. So we don't care if they've written 20 fantastic facts on one of the paragraphs. If they've left out a paragraph, there's no way they can score full marks. So they don't have to write the same amount for each of the 4 aspects, absolutely not. They might find that they can write a lot more on one section than another, and that's absolutely fine, but they have to at least have covered all 4 aspects. And this is where their planning helps. Also, we find that if they do a bit of planning, they tend to be more logical, because then they know that this key point comes under this heading and I don't need to mention it again later. And they then put their points in more of a logical order so that there is a better flow, which gives them more marks when we mark what's called their writing skills section. Just to develop that, they also then avoid waffle and what I call padding, the candy floss that carries no nutrients at all. And then they should be encouraged wherever they can to include a specific example. And right at the end, I've put in some examples of essays that our students wrote for a controlled test about a week or 2 ago. And I'll show you what I mean by putting in examples to support their argument. Okay, so this is the wonderful, wonderful system of codes that we use. It's like our map key, if you like, that we use when we're marking. And for those of you who are not familiar with marking, one of the best things that Steph Bauer introduced was the idea that we no longer put ticks, because I'm sure you get it as well in your schools. The kids will come to you and say, I've got 25 ticks and I've only got 15 marks. And then you've got to try and explain to them, a tick just means I'm acknowledging that you've made a valid point, but it might not be worth as much as someone else who made a similar point and got a tick, but theirs was far, far, far better. So when you remove the ticks, immediately I find you get fewer students coming to query their marks afterwards. So we don't put in any ticks at all. Instead, we use this system of codes that you can see here. And usually we try and put the codes in down the left-hand margin, but it's up to you where you want to put it. And you'll be amazed how quickly your students get familiar with these codes. We always joke at the marking and say there should be one that's a B for bollocks or something similar. But we just stick with things like excellent, good, vague, meaning I kind of know what you're saying, but you haven't really explained it well. R for when they've already said something, it means, yes, I've seen this, you've said this, I'm not crediting you again. I for irrelevant, and this happens quite a lot where they get sidetracked. Instead of focusing, for instance, the essays I'm going to share with you later on, we gave the girls an essay on heat islands. And a lot of them get sidetracked into humidity and into things like precipitation, because they start packing in everything they can remember about urban climates. Whereas the essay is just about, this essay that I gave you is just about the heat island phenomenon. So then we use I for irrelevant, and F means, yeah, it's kind of okay-ish. So in other words, we can't write this as absolute garbage, but we can say it's sort of fair. And so with this combination, it definitely helps me as a marker. When I see that the same symbols keep cropping up, I know this is either, like if I've used excellent 3 or 4 times, I know I'm looking at an A. If I've got lots of irrelevance and lots of repetitions, I know that it's going to be probably somewhere about a C or a D. So it starts giving you a gut feel for the essay. So what we do is where they've made a relevant or a correct point, we underline it. Where they have done something that's absolutely wrong, or that's contradictory, or that's really, it's just rubbish, we circle it. And then where they have included, either where they've unpacked something really well, so that now they're saying, this is what I mean by this. So with the heat island, okay, we need to create buildings that are painted in a lighter color, and then they unpack it by talking about the albedo being a much higher albedo, which will reflect more, which will send the heat back into the air rather than into the building materials. Then you can bracket that, because that is an example of how they are bringing in examples, or how they are showing their evidence. They can also use evidence from the source. So we'll go through that quickly. Okay, so this was the marking guide that was created for us by Steph for marking the essay. And you can see that any marking guide, I'm sure you do this at your schools as well, it's really just the nuts and bolts, it's the basics. And then we expect the students to, that's the absolute minimum that they would need. So they would need to develop this a lot more. So for instance, where they say something like this point here, which says there's a large local market, it has a very high population, 100 kilometers around Durban, you've got Pinetown, you've got a whole lot of the old ex-Bantustan areas where you've got a lot of people coming in, so that would lead to your large workforce. We expect the top candidates to really, really unpack those, not just list them. This would be a really this would be enough for a pass. If this is the kind of thing they wrote, they would pass. But in order to do well, they need to fill it up with examples and to really, I hate the word unpack, it's such a jargony word, and here I am using it myself, I'm sorry. But they really need to develop their arguments fully to get really high marks. So this is the rubric that we get. And for those of you unfamiliar with it, you'll see it's broken up into 3 components. And because of that, at the IAB marking, we mark each essay, we read each essay 3 times, which is why it takes so long. I know when you're marking essays at your school, you're probably having to mark about 70, 80 essays in a day. You know, and that's as well as all your short questions and things. At the IAB marking, by the 3rd or 4th day, we're expecting our markers to mark 50, maybe 60 a day, and that's all they're marking. And that's once they've really got into it. So initially, it's quite a slow process because you're trying to find your norm, and that can take quite a while. But what I've tried to do here, so in the essay, in any essay, at least 50% of the marks must come from the content. So the one that was in the supplementary paper, 14 marks were allocated for content. So that's all the geography. That's the geography I'm looking for. 5 marks were allocated for the writing skills, so how they put it all together. And another 5 marks for their use of the given sources and their own sources, and for their understanding of the topic. So how relevant is what they've written to this particular case study? And that is often the hardest section to mark. It's you wouldn't think so, but it tends to be, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So what I've done is try to highlight under writing skills, we are looking for structure, for layout. Is there an introduction? Is there a conclusion? They don't have to use subheadings. Contrary to popular belief, they don't have to. But we find those with clear subheadings, and they can create their own simple little subheadings. So they could just say something like factors promoting the eThekwini regional development or something. They don't have to use it as it's worded, but it does help the students to structure their work in a logical fashion, and it helps them not to repeat themselves. So is their writing concise, or have they waffled a lot? If there's no introduction and conclusion, the most they can score out of 5 is 2. And it's worth telling your students that if they don't write an introduction and conclusion, the most they'll get is 2 out of 5. If they don't cover all the sections, they'll be penalized as well for writing skills. And if their grammar is particularly poor, if their spelling is poor, they do get penalized, because even though it is a geography essay, it is still an example of an article, of a report that they are writing. We do expect that they should have a sound grasp of English. So in order to get, you see here, to get 5 out of 5, it says their writing should be sophisticated, coherent, and structured. So they don't have to be English boffins. And in fact, sometimes we find that the students who are really articulate and eloquent do a lot of, excuse the expression, what my university lecturer many years ago used to call BBB, bullshit baffles brains, where they throw in all these fancy words and sound like politicians. But when you look, there's very little substance behind it. So beware of that trap of the very, very eloquent student who is speaking beautiful English, but there's very little geography. Or those who use the geography terminology well, but they use it incorrectly. And that's also a trap that's easy to fall into when one is tired and has been marking for a long time, that you start looking for the key words. And then you suddenly think, no, but this student's contradicting him or herself. They've used the word, but they haven't used it correctly. So, and we have this rubric. I'm happy to make it available. If Steph doesn't mind, it is his rubric. And then you can see the content. We've given this rubric to help us initially to say, if they've got less than 50% of the content that we would expect, then they get 0 to 5 out of 14. If they've got sort of between 50 to 60% of the content, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to go ahead there, then they can get between 6 and 10 out of 14. And if they have got, if it's packed full of geography, and I'm really thinking, oh, this is wonderful, they can get full marks for their content. I know in the past, some of you who marked a few years ago, to try and help new markers and students, when markers are teaching their own students, we used to say that they would need, for instance, a minimum, if you look here, a minimum of 2 points for every subheading could earn the candidate 10 out of 14. We've changed this a little bit because we found that some markers interpreted this to mean that as long as the students had written 2 points for each of the 4 paragraphs, they automatically scored 10 out of 14. No, they've got to be 2 points well explained. There's a difference between somebody just making 2 points and somebody really building on those 2 points. So in the last few years, we've changed this from will earn to can earn. But they cannot get 10 out of 14 if they've got fewer than 2 points for each subheading. So we do spend a whole day, I hope you'll be pleased to know, we spend at least a full day at marking, unpacking, again, I'm using that word, going through this rubric and saying, what are we looking for? Because it definitely helps. Once we've standardized what we want, the marking is so much smoother and it goes so much easier because then everybody's working from the same benchmark. And then the supporting evidence, which is strangely enough the hardest one to allocate a mark to. A lot of the students will just quote from the given source, they will list. And that is not the same thing as understanding it. If you look at what the rubric says, I've tried to highlight each place where it says understanding, making links to understanding, using appropriate examples, application of understanding and integrating. So it's not just listing what's there. Certainly, if they list material, they'll get at least 1 out of 5. And it's very difficult for a student to score 0 in this section. If they've at least quoted one thing from the source material, they can at least get 1 out of 5. So it's almost impossible to score 0. It would have to be completely off the topic and with no use at all of the source material. But for those who've really expounded on it and explained it and elaborated and pulled in their own examples, those are the ones who really excel. And we have candidates who get full marks for their essays, and it's always so exciting when you see a candidate and you think, wow, I couldn't have written an essay like this. There are some brilliant, so well done to all of you teachers. There are some brilliant essays that come through. So this is just to recap. When we mark each essay 3 times. We read it once for the writing skills. So we look and say, is it structured? Is it grammatically correct? Does it flow? Does it make sense? And then we give them a mark out of 5. Then I mark then for the content. So how much geography is there, which is the bulk of the essay. And they get a mark out of 10 or whatever it might be for a particular essay. And then for their evidence, use of evidence, backing up examples, and how well they have understood the topic and applied their knowledge to that topic. So we often use the abbreviation SE for sources and evidence of understanding, or SA for source use and analysis of the topic. So just to go back again, so this was the material that they were provided with. And as I say, if they use their reading time, there's just so much here that they could write on the essay. Okay, so when we mark for writing skills, these are kind of the things we look at. Is there an introduction and a conclusion? Please tell your students to keep them short. They mustn't have a long chat with the examiner about, dear sir, how are you today? I hope you are keeping well. Please allow me to present my point of view. It's garbage. They must just launch in. They must make, if they've planned beforehand, tell them not to include material that they want to put under their paragraphs in the introduction, because then it's just repetitious. So it should just be a little sentence, 2 or 3 sentences about what the aim of the essay is, what they're going to be exploring, almost like a mini abstract, but very mini. Okay, then they should have clear paragraphing, and it's always easier for us as markers if there are some subheadings. If there's no clear paragraphing, some of them will write. I marked one on Saturday that was 3/4 of a page. It was 1 single paragraph and 1 sentence. So that person's really going to score badly under writing skills, because then we're trying to work out, you know, where does all this belong? Are you talking about the factors that hinder development? Are you talking about the main industries? It's just so much easier to mark, and it helps them to focus if they do structure properly. Please encourage them to write full sentences. We do accept bullet points in the sense that some of these, and I think it works for them in other subjects. Somebody mentioned economics, and I don't know how true that is. We don't have economics here, so I can't comment. They can put them in bullet points if it's bullet points to separate sentences. In other words, if I took out those bullet points, would it flow as a paragraph? Because that's okay. When we say no bullet points, we mean literally where they're just listing things like single words or a phrase. Then if they do that, then the maximum they can score for this section is 2 out of 5. And it is still worth saying to your candidates that if they've run out of time, it is better to put bullet points than not to cover all 4 paragraphs. Okay, I'm going to say that again. It's better if they don't have time to write in bullet points, even if they're not full sentences, than to not cover all 4 sections, because the bullet points, they'll be penalized on their writing skills. So that mark out of 5, they might only score 2 out of 5. So they're going to lose 3 possible marks there. But if they balance that against what they're scoring by adding it in their content, it's definitely worth it. Okay. We're looking for things like, are they explaining themselves clearly and correctly? If they're using terminology, are they using it in a way that makes sense? Are their ideas logical? Is there precise focus? Does the essay flow from one point to the next, or is it just waffly, repeat, repeat, repeat? Is it clear? There are no contradictions. And of course, what my favorite with the kids is the circular reasoning. So like a heat island means that there will be higher temperatures, or it is a desert because it is dry. And they don't understand when I say you're doing circular reasoning here, they don't understand what that is. So please tell, that's what we mean when you're looking for writing skills. Can you express yourself clearly? And please remind them they don't need to, if they are using the source given in the exam, they shouldn't waste their time by saying this is referenced from the source on page 12. That's just a waste of time. They just need to put it in inverted commas or quotation marks, and we will know that it comes from the source, because we see it coming up all the time. Okay, then the meaty part, the geographic knowledge. Remember, this should count 50% of the essay or more. So this is where we encourage them to make sure that they have the key points that they want to build their argument around in each of the sections. I always say to the girls, think of geography as a foreign language. If you are writing a French essay, you have to have the French vocab. If you're writing an Afrikaans essay, you have to have Afrikaans vocab. So if you want to write a geography essay, I'm looking for geography. And they know, the top students know that one geographic term correctly used in an appropriate context is worth 50 English words of trying to explain what they mean by the concept of runoff, or what they mean by infiltration or multiplier effect. So their writing is so much more polished and concise if they speak geography. They must show that they're able to apply their learned theory. And that's why I say they mustn't just throw in everything they know and expect us to sift out, sift the material and hope that all the chunky bits don't get through. Okay, then make sure that this is what I mean about meaty content. I'm looking for lots and lots and lots of geography terms. They must pack their essays full of geography, and this is their chance to show off. So even if the examiner's not asked them specifically about the Dubai Trade Port, talk about it. Talk about the fact of why the King Shaka Airport was built on this whole greenfield site. What is a greenfield site? Why was it chosen there? How has that impacted on the industries in the area? So they don't have to limit themselves to what they're given. What they're given is just really a starting point for the students who maybe didn't have access to a lot more information in their classrooms. And then the last section, which is their evidence and their insight for the topic. They should use the sources, but they should use them not just to quote them, but to explain what they mean, to develop their ideas, to justify a point. So they might say something like, because mining in the eThekwini region is only 1%, this means that a lot of the industries cannot be based on manufacturing, but are rather on processing of primary things or agriculture like sugar. I mean, that's not a very good example, but they should use those sources to really show that they are thinking geographically. We love it if they can include things that are not in their textbooks. So I mean, some of the girls say to me that they know that if they just read the newspaper or listen to the news every day, they actually don't need to have a textbook because most of what's current comes up anyway. It's one of the few subjects where we do allow them to include diagrams in their essays. I know the life sciences people would have a nervous breakdown if we said that, but the diagrams should not repeat what's already been said. That's wasting their time. Again, they're not going to get credit twice. If they include a diagram, it should be because it's easier than trying to explain the concept in words, or if they want to link it like a flow map, a flow diagram, a multi-flow map, or a little tree map, where they're trying to save time by explaining how things, influence one another. And then they should explore their ideas, and when they do use the sources, are they used correctly? Do those sources add value to what they are trying to say? Not just are they quoting because they're trying to quote something. We even had students who quote incorrectly, which shows you that they don't actually understand what that information means. So when we mark the essay, obviously you will in your classroom have a different system. And I know at the IAB marking, Steph always says to us, remember that when we're marking the IAB finals, we are not marking to give a lot of feedback for the students to learn from. We are just marking to reward what skills and knowledge they have. So you might find that depending whether your students get all their papers back, and I believe some schools don't automatically give exams back, it will influence how you decide to how much red stuff you want to put on your essay. These are just some examples, and I'm not saying they're particularly good or bad. I'm just showing you how I mark examples in class. So these essays were done for a controlled test, and it was on the heat island. So I've just scanned in a few sections of the essay. The girls were not really given much source material. They were given one little diagram that showed some isotherms over London. That was all. So at this point, we were really just testing their theoretical knowledge that they had to use. And you can see I've tried to give them feedback in the sense that, what's wrong here? I want you to give me more on this section. What do you mean? Like she said here, something applies with the pollution in this place. It was the same applies with the pollution. I don't know what you're talking about. So I can there use the symbol V for vague, or if I'm giving it back to the girls, then I'll probably give them a bit more detail. But if I were just marking for the end of year, I would probably just do what I've done here on the side where I've written good, good, good. The more underlining I can find, the better the essay is likely to be. The more circles that I've got, like look at this one on the right here. This was not a very good essay, where they've things like vague pronouns, these, this, they, well, I don't know who you're talking about, and repetitious. So this child, when she gets her essay back, will see that she has said the same thing in one paragraph 4 times already. So she's actually just wasting her time. Whereas this one on the left-hand side here, so she's giving me stuff on the causes of heat islands. So she's explained the density of buildings, the buildings absorb insulation and give off terrestrial radiation. So she's unpacking that idea a little bit. The idea that the CBD has artificial surfaces, and then she's given me examples, roads and cement. If they're dark in color, they will absorb heat. So there she's unpacking the ideas, which is why I'm giving her credit for analysis and understanding rather than just listing. You know, the weak ones will just list and say the sources are artificial. Well, so what? The ones who score highly under the source analysis are the ones who explain why. So I always say to them, well, so what? If you write a statement, you've got to say, so what? Or explain why you say that if you really want to do well. So these were just a couple of examples. Again, you can see here, like where the student has said here, measures to reduce the heat island effect. People can start making their cities more green. I hate it when they do that. It's like when they write the ubiquitous answer that is always educate people or give them jobs. Yeah, and I want to vomit. I really do, because who must educate people? How must you be educated? Who must give you a job? What kind of job? It's not like I think it's like a band-aid, you know, just pluck it down there if you don't know what else to say. So technically, whenever they write bad, sloppy English like this, people can start making their cities more green. Oh, what, must I go and set up a fountain in the middle of Nelson Mandela Square? What do you want me to do? You know, it's these vague plans of action that don't have any step-by-step of this is what we need to do, or the government needs to do, or municipalities need to do. Some vagueness here too, like heat traps the gases that are emitted by factories. Well, I don't know what the hell she's on about here. You know, does she mean the gases trap heat? And in which case, which gases trap heat? So, you know, this is an example of a very wishy-washy essay. It's a very, and I see it's cut off my symbols on the side that would have been vague or irrelevant. Whereas this one here, you can see, I thought this was a really good essay. There's lots of underlining. They've explained themselves really well. They've brought in quite a bit of their own knowledge. They're speaking quite a lot of geography. And just the last two little examples, I think these were the last two I wanted to show you. So again, these are just how I mark. So this, again, this is marking to give them feedback. So, and again, whenever they write nonsense, I try and call them out on it. So if you can see, I hope you can see where my pointer is. It says, humans hate it when they say, try and do this. No, what was it, Yoda? Do or not do. There is no try. You don't try and do something. You either do it or you don't. Try use public transport instead of private to reduce the greenhouse gases. Well, I don't know how that's supposed to help. Tell me how I'm going to be reducing greenhouse gases by catching a bus. Explain it to me. What gases and why is that important? Use less of electricity. You can see I get very annoyed and fed up when I start reading these essays. Untar the roads. I said it sounds like a Tony Braxton song, untar my road. How the hell do you untar a road and plant more trees? So she's saying I must plant trees on the road. So, you know, when they write rubbish like this, it's very hard to give them positive feedback. So I do try not to rip them to shreds. This is an example here where a child has used bullet points, which was certainly better than not putting anything down, because otherwise she's a slow worker. She would never have finished. But I was able to give her at least 4 out of 10 because the content was out of 10. So there's content there. But I've pulled her down on writing skills and on her understanding of content. Like here, white is the best color. Oh, I think I could be shot for saying that. White is the best color. Why is white the best color for cities? Explain. So you can see she didn't do very well. She got 8 out of 20. So it was enough for her to score 40%, but it certainly wasn't worth anything more than that. So how do I unshare, Inika? Stop share, there we go. Let's try that. Okay, so that was all I wanted to show you. And then I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments, and I'm sorry, I talk the hind leg off a donkey, I know.
I think it's brilliant, and I love your sense of humor. I wish we could sit and hear how you comment on each one that you mark.
That feels, no, I'm just a bit loopy sometimes.
Is there anyone with any questions for Eileen, please? There haven't really been any questions in the chat, so let's see, there's one. No, thank you so much, very insightful. Anyone else with a question?
You're welcome.
Anyone? Looks like
Yes, I've got a question. This is Sean.
Great, Sean.
Hi, Sean.
Hi, Eileen. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I just
You're
have a
welcome. Thank you.
question
Very
around. My pleasure. I just have a question around. You mentioned geography is like a second language, and that they need to use that language effectively. I think my problem is that many of our students, it's actually a third language or a fourth language for them.
Yes.
So trying to express themselves in English, in geography, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
I just do worry about that. Sorry
It's
to
a very
interrupt,
valid point, but sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, you go ahead.
In that sense, I think it actually helps them in the same way. If they think of it as like the girls or boys who do French or German or any other language as a third language, they know that they have to learn the vocab. And for those for whom English is a third language, is not a home language, if they learn their geography terminology, they then will do better than because by trying to explain something in English in a geography essay, if you are not good at English, is actually harder, I think, than if you've learned, like if a student who maybe is a foreigner or a local student who's speaking English as a third or fourth language, if they know the word hydrological cycle or they know gradient, it's easier to use that word than to say the steepness of the land, and I'm not giving you a very good example, but I actually think it's easier to learn the geography terminology in the same way that they would learn it for any other subject, or like in maths, what is an algebraic equation? What is see, I haven't done maths so many years, but they learn what each of those terms mean. And if they do that, it actually makes it's easier for them, because then they don't have to use their English. They can just speak geography. And I think we as teachers, we do have to teach them what the verbs mean. So when it says outline or discuss or assess, they need to understand, what those words mean. But if they've got the geography content, they can still do extremely well, even if their writing skills are not great.
Yeah, I hear you, and absolutely right. I think just my worry is that, and I've had to do it myself, is that you sometimes have to wade through the lack of grasp of the English language in order to find the understanding of geography. And it is sometimes difficult, but I do think we need to give them that credit, they are trying to express themselves in a third language.
Exactly. And I think that is where, it's important that the content counts a lot more than the other aspects of the essay, because if the content knowledge is there, when we say their writing should be good, we just mean that, can we understand what they're trying to say? We don't mean they should be writing like an English AP student. It's just, can you understand what you're trying to say to us? If you can't, then you're likely to be marked down on writing skills, because I'm thinking, I don't actually know what you're saying to me here. But if the geography content is there, especially if they've got the terminology, they can really do quite nicely.
Awesome. Thank you, Eileen.
You're most welcome.
There's another question from Esther. She says, can you see if there's if the essays are from a boys' school or a girls' school? Often
it depends. It's funny you ask that. The handwriting is often, although I don't think anymore, typically the girls tend to print more than use cursive writing, which I find quite interesting. The girls use a lot of color, which I always tell them, please don't waste your time with pretty highlighters, but they do, and they underline in pretty pink and green. And the boys tend to use a lot more of the economic terminology, and I'm sounding so sexist here, please forgive me, I don't, but generally we find the boys schools tend to come through very strongly when it's an economically based essay, like on multiplier effects and forward and backward linkages and that kind of thing, and they talk about share prices, and whereas the girls enjoy the essays more about poverty and people in informal settlements, or and I don't know if it's just years and years of, maybe I see what I'm looking for, in which case please forgive me, but I think generally, because it's like something like a report, it doesn't have, as long as they've got the content, their gender is irrelevant.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Rodney wants to know, when you speak about references, what are you meaning with referencing, like for an ORT?
No. If they, so for instance, if they're using the source that was given to them in the essay, so like that Etequini infographic. So if they want to quote there that what 16% contributes 16% to the GDP, but there's 19% of the population of the country there, then they just put that in inverted commas, showing I've got that from the source you gave us. That's all we're looking for. And even if they don't, it doesn't really matter because we know that that's where they got it. What we're saying is that a lot of them do try to develop those references and make them full-blown references. Like they'll say, this is from my geography grade 10 focus, grade 12 focus textbook. They mustn't do that because they're not going to get credit for it at that point, and it's just using up precious time. So I think some people that they need to reference in that exam essay. So, and they don't. They really not for the IB final exam. They don't. They obviously do for their research tasks and that, but not in their final exam. We just assume that that's knowledge that they have.
Okay, great. Thank you. Adelina wants to know if you would be willing to share your presentation.
Absolutely, with absolute pleasure. If you want it, I can email it to Inika or to Amanda. Whatever, with pleasure. It's just a boring little PowerPoint, but you're very welcome.
Oh, Shane, thank you.
As I say, and please remember that the sources are not mine, they are IAB sources, the rubric and that. So I'm sure we're allowed to make those available.
Yeah, no, thank you. Toby wants to know what's the difference between a report or an essay? Should they approach it differently?
Not really. I think often it's really the style that a report is very factual. We tell them always, if possible, to avoid writing in the first person. So those who want to write things like, well, I personally think that, scrap that. They literally are writing, I always say to them, imagine you're writing like a newspaper article. But of course, most of them don't read newspaper articles anymore. But they should avoid writing in the first person. So really just keep it a factual thing. If it's what we found at the end of last year, they had an essay on sugar production in Malalaan. Most of you will remember that. And a lot of them thought mistakenly that they were writing on behalf of the sugarcane people in that area. And they were trying to convince people how they should invest in them or something. So I think they just need to read the question very carefully. I mean, they weren't really penalized, but the essays, a lot of them took on a very argumentative, persuasive kind of tone. So it's really not about that. The most they ever need to write is if it's a report, some of them might write, "Dear Sir," and just to remind them always that their names are not to appear in the IAB script. So some of them have come up with very funny things, you know, like we get Joe Soap or John Doe or whatever. And there was one quite naughty one last year, and thank goodness I can't remember what it was now, that we had to read it out loud. When we read it out loud, we just about fell off our chairs. It was a very below the belt name that had been written. So it's fine. They can write under a pseudonym, but they don't even need to say yours sincerely X. You know, they write, if they want to, "Dear Sir," and that's more than enough. But they don't need to, "Please kindly take this under consideration at your next AGM." No, we're looking for geography.
Great, thank you. Sizwe, I think, has the last question. How long would you say should an essay be approximately?
In terms of how long should it take them, or how to take? We usually say 1 to 2 pages, but of course it depends very much on the handwriting size, and also on, a lot of them can write a brilliant essay in less than a page, and others can write rubbish over 3 pages. So it's really about, that's why I say the key words. How much geography have you packed into that? And I really find if they structure it and do a bit of planning beforehand, so you've got key words, you can do a brilliant essay in at least maximum 1.5 pages. And it's worth, they always don't want to spend time planning because they just want to launch in. But I promise you, I keep saying to them, the planning is worth it. It's worth that 30 seconds. And we practice in class. Yeah, brainstorm this 30 seconds. It's worth it because it just cuts out all the waffle.
Thank you. I think Elisa summarized it well in the chat. She says, "And there is light."
And as I said to Inika when we spoke, I said, I love essays. I can't understand how anybody would not. They are such fun to mark that you don't get bored. They are just I love them. It's where you can really get to grips with the students and what they're thinking and their understanding. And, you know, I know one word answers are quick and easy to mark, but here you can really see a student who's really got a deep grasp. And when you can give someone full marks, it is the most, you know, we all say, wow, the student got full marks. It's like it's like someone's giving you a Christmas present. So those of you who don't see your students' final essays and you don't know that they've got full marks, I promise you they are celebrated in that marking venue where we can award someone full marks. It is just, it's like, you know, like when your kids do well in school and you say, wow, this is brilliant. So that is essays. It's so rewarding. And it's funny. We get all sorts of funny things coming through that you know, we laugh a lot.
Yes, I can absolutely understand that one. Paul has just given us one last question. Do you suggest they start with the essay, leave it, put it in the middle, or write it at the end? Is there a difference in their marks then?
We found that under the new format, with the new 200 mark thing, very few of them don't get to the essay because most of them actually do question 1 first, and then they must do it with question 1. We find those, they don't do well if they break up their questions. It's always not a good idea. So if they want to do, say, question 2 first and then question 3 and then do question 1 with the essay, that's fine. But generally, we always say to them, allow yourself 1.5 hours for essay for question 1, and then 45 minutes for section 2 and 3. So the last few years, because the essay has been in question 1, we found very few of them don't, most of them do finish. There are very few who don't finish. And there's been a huge improvement in the quality of the essay. So I think it very much depends on the students themselves. Some of them like to leave it to the end. I would rather say they must be wary of their time. If they know that I've got this much time, if, you know, use that time, because otherwise they panic and think, I haven't done the essay. But it's very much a personal thing. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to send you the chat, Aline, so you can see how many people have appreciated your time and effort for this afternoon.
It's my pleasure. As I say, I'm sorry, I know I gabble on all the time, but thank you for inviting me to do this. And I just wish everybody would come and join us on the essay panel. It is such fun.
No, thank you. It's been brilliant. And please stay warm and healthy and everything else. Good luck with your marking.
Thank you. Thank you, Ineke, and thank you, everybody, for spending time to come and do this. I know everyone's cold and busy. So thank you all very, very much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon. Goodbye.
Yes. Thank you.